Imagine a serial killer, you know? Like, just picture one in your head right now.
You're probably picturing a loner, right?
Exactly. Someone isolated, probably with a history of severe neglect.
Operating in the shadows over a span of years, carefully picking victims.
Yeah, victims that fit a very specific, like, twisted psychological profile.
But what if you take that image and just completely throw it out the window?
Because today, for this deep dive, we're looking at 3 wealthy, popular teenagers. Kids living in absolute luxury who unleashed a slaughter that, well, it broke basically every single rule of criminal psychology.
And not just broke the rules, but shattered them at a velocity that is almost unprecedented in modern criminology.
Totally.
I mean, we usually look for cooling off periods, right?
Yeah.
A distinct methodology and escalation over years.
Right, but here, we are looking at an absolute explosion of violence. 21 murders.
Yeah.
In just 21 days.
It's just staggering to even say out loud.
It really is. And that is the mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking a highly detailed, translated account of one of the most chilling true crime sprees of the 21st century.
The Dnipropetrovsk maniacs case.
Yes, which took place in Ukraine back in the summer of 2007. Now, if you are familiar with the darker corners of the internet, you might actually know this case because it is infamously associated with a viral video.
Right, the one known as 3 Guys, 1 Hammer.
Yeah, which is unfortunately how most of the public encountered this case to begin with.
Through a single piece of digital media that was just completely stripped of all context.
This is shared purely for shock value on early video sharing sites.
Exactly. But while the internet knows this case for that one horrific video, that recording represents only a tiny fraction of a much larger reign of terror.
And that's why we're going to examine the entire timeline of this 21-day nightmare. We need to understand the psychological profiles of the 3 perpetrators.
Viktor Sayenko, Igor Suprenyuk, and Alexander Hansa.
Right. And most importantly, we are going to look at how unchecked escalation, immense social privilege, and this really twisted desire for notoriety all just culminated in unspeakable violence.
The velocity you mentioned earlier is really the key here. 21 murders in 21 days is an extraordinarily compressed timeline for serial offenses.
Like almost one a day.
It completely defies the typical cooling-off periods we usually see when we're profiling criminals. When violence accelerates that quickly, it usually means the internal mechanisms that, regulate human behavior have completely collapsed.
So let's figure out how that collapse actually happened. But to do that, we have to start with the city itself. Let's set the scene for you.
It's the summer of 2007 in Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine.
And for those who don't know the geography, this is a major city sitting right on the Dnieper River.
It's an industrial hub, but it's also very peaceful.
Yeah, it's tourist-friendly. People are out enjoying the summer. They're walking along the riverbanks, just going about their daily lives. The normalcy is absolute.
It's a city that had really found a comfortable rhythm. In 2007, Ukraine was in a period of economic growth and stability.
Right.
Cities like Dnipropetrovsk were shaking off the heavier remnants of the post-Soviet transition. People felt safe, they were out late.
The baseline of security in a community like that is just very high.
And then that baseline is violently shattered.
Completely shattered. We see that erasure start on the night of June 25, 2007.
The first victim.
Right. Yekaterina Ilchenko. She's a 33-year-old university lecturer. She had just been visiting a friend, having tea, and was walking home at about 4 a.m.
And there's a detail here that is just heartbreaking.
It really is. Her mother woke up in the middle of the night with a terrible feeling, just a pure, mother's intuition.
She realizes her daughter's bed hasn't been slept in.
So she walks out onto the street to look for her, heading toward the friend's house.
And instead of finding her daughter walking toward her, she encounters a group of people gathered in the road.
Yes. She walks up and finds her daughter's body right there on the street.
Just awful.
Yekaterina's head and face have been completely smashed in. The authorities immediately suspected it was with a heavy, blunt object.
Like a hammer or a steel pipe.
Exactly.
Right.
And there were defensive wounds on her arms, meaning she saw it coming. She raised her arms. She tried to fight back against this absolute brutality.
This initial strike introduces a highly chaotic element for the local police. I mean, think about it from an investigative standpoint.
A university lecturer walking home.
Right, and it's a brutal, close-quarters attack. Blunt force trauma requires a significant amount of physical force, stamina, and proximity.
You have to get right up in their space.
You do, which usually implies an interpersonal motive, like a crime of passion, immense rage, or a robbery gone terribly wrong.
But her belongings were largely untouched.
which immediately complicates the robbery theory.
And before the police can even, process what they're looking at, the very next morning, June 26, a second body is found.
Just hours later.
This one is just 100 meters away from where Yekaterina was killed, sitting on a park bench.
The victim is Roman Tatarovich, a 45-year-old homeless man.
He was killed in his sleep. His face was smashed so badly he was completely unrecognizable. Another homeless man actually had to identify him.
Just based on the clothes he was wearing and the fact that this was his usual sleeping spot?
This is where the behavioral analysis becomes incredibly complex, almost instantly, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because serial offenders typically have a type. They hunt within a specific demographic because that demographic fulfills a specific psychological need.
Or because that demographic is just accessible to them.
Exactly. But here, it's like a storm.
Yeah, if you imagine a tornado that touches down and destroys a structurally sound brick building, the university lecturer,
Right.
and then a few seconds later destroys a fragile, temporary tent, the homeless man on a bench,
Yeah.
there's no apparent pattern.
There is no specific demographic being targeted.
It's just total indiscriminate destruction.
The tornado analogy captures the sheer physical destruction perfectly, but it misses the deliberate intent behind it.
How so?
Well, a tornado doesn't choose to touch down. These killers did. They walked up to that bench. But you are entirely right about the psychological effect on the community.
It must have been terrifying.
When a killer targets a specific demographic, say sex workers or young men of a certain age, the rest of the community, while horrified, subconsciously builds a psychological wall.
They think, I am not in the target group, therefore my family and I are safe.
Precisely. You compartmentalize the fear. But here, the wall is gone. The randomness is the weapon.
Wow, yeah. Without a pattern, the entire city becomes a potential target.
The unpredictability terrorizes the whole population, not just the physical victims. When you pair a university lecturer with a sleeping, unhoused man within hours of each other, the message sent to the city is clear.
Anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Exactly.
And the randomness just keeps going. There's a third attack shortly after. A 58-year-old man named Viktor Protsenko.
He is walking near his home in broad daylight or early evening, and he is hit from behind.
But he actually survives.
Yes, and the only reason he survives is that a woman inside a hair salon sees what's happening through her window.
She starts screaming at the attackers through the glass.
But the yelling scares them off, and she immediately calls an ambulance.
But because Victor was hit from behind, and the woman only saw a group of young men running away from a distance, neither of them can identify the attackers.
Which leaves the investigation effectively blind. They have the methodology right, blunt force trauma from behind.
But absolutely zero descriptive data on the perpetrators.
Exactly.
Wait, I have to stop you here. I just don't get this at all.
What part?
If they're hitting random targets, a lecturer, then a homeless man, then a 58-year-old guy, and leaving zero witnesses who can actually describe a face or a vehicle, the police literally have no data. None.
Right.
So how does a detective even open a file on this? Are they just sitting at their desks waiting for the next body to drop? Where do you even begin?
You begin by looking for the invisible threads, but your frustration is exactly what the detectives were feeling.
I mean, it just seems impossible.
Early on, law enforcement often defaults to assuming these are crimes of opportunity or isolated incidents of local, unconnected violence.
Because they have nothing else to go on.
Right. If you don't have a suspect, you look at the victim's inner circles. But when the victims have absolutely nothing in common, that web yields nothing.
So what did the police do?
They actually tried to keep these early murders quiet.
Of course they did. Control the narrative. Don't scare the tourists.
It's a very common institutional response. They didn't want to incite a citywide panic, and they were concerned about protecting the city's reputation and its economic engines.
I guess that makes sense from a political standpoint, but still.
If you tell a city of 1 million people that a phantom killer is bludgeoning random people to death with hammers, the city shuts down. Commerce stops.
But you can't hide a smashed-in skull in a modern city. People talk.
Exactly. Information in a vacuum creates rumors, and those rumors are often faster and more vicious than the truth.
So the locals started talking.
Mouth to mouth about what they started calling the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs.
The community knew a storm was happening. The hospital workers knew. The ambulance drivers knew.
The morticians knew. The authorities wouldn't issue a weather warning, but the citizens were already locking their doors.
Okay, let's step off the streets for a second and go into the homes of the attackers. We really need to understand who was actually holding the hammer.
This is where the case completely shatters the stereotype.
Right, the stereotype of a serial killer coming from severe childhood neglect or absolute crushing poverty.
The demographic profile of these perpetrators is arguably the most critical and confounding element of this entire analysis.
It really forces us to reevaluate the origins of severe psychopathy. So we have three teenagers, around 19 years old when they were caught. Let's look at their backgrounds.
First, you have Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk.
These two come from incredibly wealthy, highly connected families in the community. Victor's father is a prominent lawyer and a prosecutor.
And Igor's father is literally the personal pilot for the president of Ukraine.
I mean, that is a serious level of connection. Both of them have stay-at-home mothers who are highly involved in their lives. They live in massive homes. They lack for absolutely nothing.
They are completely insulated by socioeconomic privilege. In a post-Soviet system, connections like a prosecutor father or a presidential pilot father don't just mean you have money.
Right, it means you have structural power.
Exactly. It means the rules that govern the rest of the population do not necessarily apply to you.
And then you have Alexander Hansa. His background is a stark contrast.
Very different.
He comes from a much poorer background. He lives with his single mother in a rundown apartment building.
But everything we know about his upbringing says his mother provided a warm, loving home.
She worked incredibly hard to raise him right, to keep him out of trouble. He just happened to befriend Victor, and through Victor, he met Igor.
They were just regular teenagers at first. They hung out, they threw rocks at trains, broke some windows.
Typical, albeit delinquent teenage stuff.
But there is a pivotal moment of divergence from typical teenage delinquency. A psychological turning point that we see in the backgrounds of many white-collar criminals, actually, but rarely applied to extreme physical violence.
The bicycle theft.
Yes!
Victor and Igor are caught stealing a bicycle. It's a blatant crime. And because of who their parents are, the police just let them off with a warning.
No charges, no permanent record.
No real consequences. And this seems to be the moment they begin to feel completely untouchable, invincible.
If we dive into the criminology here, we're looking at the concept of learned impunity.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, when a teenager whose prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for risk assessment and consequence, is still developing, crosses a legal boundary and experiences zero friction from the social systems designed to stop them, their internal boundaries shift dramatically.
So because the cops essentially bowed to their dads, their brains literally wire themselves to believe they are above the law.
Exactly. The lack of consequence doesn't teach them a lesson about morality.
It teaches them a lesson about power.
It teaches them that the rules literally do not apply to them. The socioeconomic shield becomes a psychological permission slip.
Wow.
And for someone like Igor, who was already harboring dark tendencies, that permission slip is disastrous.
And they decide to test those boundaries in darker and darker ways. Now, Alexander, the third friend from the poorer background, he had a severe phobia.
He was terrified of blood.
Right. He couldn't even look at it.
Yeah.
So to cure him of this fear, Victor and Igor initiate this horrific campaign of animal abuse.
They start capturing stray dogs and cats off the streets.
They torture them, hang them from trees, and take photographs of the mutilations, posing with the dead animals.
Animal cruelty is a well-known escalation marker part of the McDonald triad, but here it is applied in a highly orchestrated, almost clinical group dynamic.
It's not just a solitary kid acting out his rage in the woods.
Right, it is a shared activity.
I was thinking about this, and it feels like a twisted, evil inversion of exposure therapy.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
You know, normally in a clinical setting, exposure therapy is used to slowly introduce someone to their fear so they can overcome it and become a healthier, more functional person.
Right, to heal them.
But here, they are systematically desensitizing Alexander to violence so he can become a monster alongside them. They are deliberately eroding his natural human aversion to suffering.
That is a profound way to look at it. They are weaponizing desensitization. What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanics of the group.
Victor and Igor are essentially dismantling Alexander's empathy as a bonding exercise.
Yes. And we also have to look closely at Igor's psychological profile because he is the clear ringleader.
He had a deep obsession with violence, a fascination with Nazi memorabilia that he hid in his room.
And an intense admiration for Hitler fueled, in part because they actually shared a birthday.
Which is just a massive red flag. How do parents not see that?
Well, because of the bubble of privilege. When a kid from a wealthy family exhibits dark behavior, the parents often reframe it as eccentricity or a phase.
Oh, I see. If a poor kid does it, it's a threat.
Exactly. If a rich kid does it, it's just a quirk. This ideological scaffolding, the Nazi obsession, provides Igor with a framework for his cruelty.
He sees himself as superior.
He does. But the group dynamic is what truly accelerates the violence. There is a concept in psychology called folie à deux, or in this case, folie à trois madness shared by two or three.
Meaning they feed off each other's energy.
Precisely. When a group commits a taboo act together, like killing these animals and photographing them, it binds them tightly.
The secret becomes a cohesive glue.
They reinforce each other's worst impulses, completely neutralizing any individual feelings of guilt.
So they escalate to robbing taxi passengers. Igor's father actually buys him a green car for his graduation.
Hoping he might use it to work as an unregistered taxi to make some spending money.
Instead, they use the car to pick up real passengers, pull a gun, and rob them.
But this is where the group fractures.
Right. When Igor actually pulls a gun on a passenger in the confines of that car, Alexander senses that this has crossed a fundamental, terrifying line.
He bows out of the physical attacks.
He tells them he's done with the violence. He still hangs around, he still helps them sell the stolen mobile phones, but he refuses to be in the car when they attack.
Alexander hits his psychological limit. His empathy, or at least his sense of self-preservation, hasn't been completely dismantled.
He recognizes the shift from thrill-seeking delinquency to lethal intent.
But for Victor and Igor, the absence of Alexander's hesitation removes their last internal break.
Without Alexander there to show fear or hesitation, an echo chamber of pure aggression is created between Victor and Igor.
Exactly.
So we move from the boys' escalating desensitization directly into the sheer frenzy of July 2007. Alexander's out of the physical attacks, and Victor and Igor unleash an absolute slaughter on the city.
And I mean frenzy. Let's look at July 7th.
4 people are murdered by these 2 teenagers in a single day.
4 separate homicides in one 24-hour period using blunt force trauma is just staggering. We really need to understand the physical reality of this.
What do you mean?
Well, firing a gun takes a fraction of a second, right? Beating a human being to death with a steel pipe or a hammer requires an astonishing level of sustained adrenaline.
Immense physical exertion.
And absolute sociopathic detachment from human suffering. To do that 4 times in a day means they were operating in a state of pure euphoric mania.
It's horrifying to even comprehend that level of energy spent on violence.
Yeah.
Let's walk through that day, just to understand the sheer chaos they unleashed.
It's brutal. First is there's Igor Nekvolota. He was a recently discharged soldier. He had been out at a nightclub celebrating and was walking home. They killed him right near the door of his apartment building. His own mother found his body.
Next is Yelena Schramm. She was a 28-year-old single mother working as a security guard. She felt sick at work and was just walking home early to rest.
They destroyed her face so thoroughly she could only be identified by the security uniform she was wearing.
Then Valentina Hanja, a mother of 3, and just to clarify for everyone listening, absolutely no relation to their friend Alexander Hanja. Same brutal method.
Look at those 3 victims. A male soldier, a young single mother, an older mother of 3.
They are operating with complete impulsivity.
There is no stalking, no selection criteria other than vulnerability, proximity, and opportunity.
They're just driving around in that green car, seeing someone walking alone, and striking.
Which leads to the 4th attack of the day, which involves 2 14-year-old boys, Andrei Sidyuk and Vadim Likov.
They were waking up early, packing their gear to go fishing. There's a chilling detail here, too.
What's that?
A 3rd friend was actually supposed to go with them, but his mother was so worried about the rumors of the maniacs that she refused to let him leave the house.
Wow. That mother's fear literally saved her son's life.
It really illustrates how the ambient terror was altering daily routines across the city.
The formal institutions weren't warning the public, but the informal networks, mothers talking to mothers, were acting as an early warning system.
So Andrei and Vadim are riding their bikes down a quiet road, and they notice a green car following them.
The car stops, Victor and Igor get out, and they just attack.
Vadim manages to dodge the initial swing and escapes. He runs into the woods and hides in the dense bushes. He is literally holding his breath, listening to the killers thrashing through the brush, searching for him.
Just terrifying for a 14-year-old.
When they finally give up and drive away, Vadim runs back to his friend Andrei. He uses his own shirt to try and stop the massive bleeding from Andrei's head, screaming for help, but it's too late. Andrei dies at the hospital.
But Vadim survives, and he instantly becomes the single most important asset to the investigation.
Because he actually saw them.
He can describe the attackers, he can describe the green car, he can identify their approximate age, their build, everything.
But this is where I have to pause. Because the police reaction here is infuriating. It's beyond infuriating, honestly. It's corrupt.
It is incredibly dark.
Vadim gives them the description. Two young men, 20s to 30s, driving a green Daewoo Lanos. But instead of taking this absolute goldmine of information and launching a manhunt, the police turn on the 14-year-old survivor.
They brutally interrogate Vadim.
They beat him. They try to force a confession out of this traumatized kid who just watched his best friend get murdered while they were going fishing. Why on earth would the police target the surviving victim of a serial killer? I know you mentioned institutional response earlier, but this is actively destroying a case.
It's a terrifying phenomenon, but we have to understand the mechanics of institutional desperation and cognitive dissonance.
Explain that, because I am just baffled.
The death toll was climbing rapidly. The political pressure from Kiev, the capital, was immense. The local police chief is looking at losing his job, or worse.
Okay, sure, they're under pressure.
When an institution is that desperate, it develops extreme tunnel vision. Closing a case quickly, having literally any suspect in custody, suddenly supersedes finding the actual truth.
So they'd rather frame a child than admit they can't catch the real killer.
Unfortunately, yes. It's easier to break a traumatized teenager using high-pressure interrogation tactics.
Like sleep deprivation, physical intimidation.
Screaming that they have evidence against him. It's easier to do that and close the file than to admit to the public that there is an untraceable random killing squad roaming your streets.
Because if Vadim confesses, the panic stops. The politicians are happy. The police look effective.
Exactly. It's a massive failure of the system.
Vadim is only saved because his mother realizes what is happening, gets a lawyer, and threatens to sue the authorities and take it directly to the National Prosecutor's Office.
They finally release him, but the damage is done. The police wasted precious time trying to frame a kid.
And that wasted time is paid for in blood, because it allowed the frenzy of July 7th to evolve into something even more detached, performative, and grotesque just a few days later.
Which brings us to the darkest point of this deep dive, the murder of Sergei Yatsenko on July 12th.
This is the event that culminated in the infamous 3 Guys, 1 Hammer video. But before we talk about what they did to him, we need to talk about who Sergei was.
Yes, because the internet reduced this man to a viral clip, and we need to restore his humanity.
It is vital to remember the victims as complex human beings, loved by their families, not just as objects in a forensic timeline or a shock video thumbnail.
Exactly.
Sergei was a 48-year-old grandfather. He was a survivor. He had battled throat cancer, and because of the treatments, he couldn't speak normally.
He could only speak in a faint whisper.
He had a loving wife, a son, and a grandson he absolutely doted on. He had recently bought an old Dnepro motorcycle, and when he got stressed or needed time to himself, his favorite thing to do was ride his motorcycle out in the quiet, wooded areas of the city to clear his head.
And on July 12th, he goes out for a ride and doesn't come back.
And again, we see a systemic hurdle that delays the investigation. His wife, knowing he would never just vanish, attempts to report him missing immediately.
But the police enforce a mandatory 72-hour waiting period before they will launch a search for a missing adult.
The family doesn't wait, though. They frantically print out flyers. They are taping them to bus stops, telephone poles, asking everyone.
4 days go by.
Finally, a tip comes in. Sergei's motorcycle is spotted parked near the edge of some woods. The police go in, and 100 meters inside the tree line, they find his body.
He is identified by the suit he was wearing.
A suit his wife said he always loved to wear.
And it is the recording of this specific murder that was later recovered by law enforcement.
We have to detail the chilling nature of this recording to understand the psychology, but we'll do it carefully, obviously, without glorifying it.
It's important for the context.
The video starts before Sergei even arrives. Igor is practically vibrating with excitement. He's showing a yellow-handled hammer to the camera, grinning, asking Victor if he's ready.
Then Sergei rides by on his motorcycle.
Igor steps out, swings the hammer, knocks Sergei off the bike, and drags him into the woods. The assault is just brutal. They smash his face.
Sergei is still moving, still alive, desperately trying to protect his head.
So Victor takes a screwdriver, or a knife, the reports vary, and begins repeatedly stabbing Sergei in the eyes and directly into his brainstem, twisting the tool.
They are kicking him in the stomach, laughing.
The clinical detachment is staggering. They are dissecting a living human being.
And the aftermath might be the most disturbing part.
Right, because they finish and they calmly walk over to a puddle. They wash the blood off their hands and their faces, joking around.
So that they can take clean, smiling souvenir photos posing with Sergei's body.
So what does this all mean? To me, it feels exactly like taking hunting trophies. You see those photos of big game hunters posing next to a lion? It wasn't just about the act of killing anymore.
It was about the consumption of the memory later.
Exactly.
The hunting trophy analogy is accurate, but what's truly fascinating here is how the presence of the camera fundamentally changes the psychological dynamic of the crime.
Because they're filming it.
Think about early digital cameras and flip phones in 2007. When they hit record, they aren't just killers anymore. They become actors, directors, and an audience in their own horrific movie.
The camera lens acts as a psychological buffer.
It completely detaches them from the reality of their victim. Sergei ceases to be a human being and becomes merely a prop in their production.
They are performing.
They are performing for their future selves and possibly for an imagined audience of peers. It is the ultimate narcissistic violence.
The validation of capturing it on film supersedes the reality of the violence they are inflicting.
But this peak of arrogance, this feeling that they're untouchable movie stars of their own lives, leads directly to the very mundane mistake that causes their downfall.
Right. They thought they were criminal masterminds, but they tripped over basic greed.
Serial offenders who escalate this quickly almost always make a structural error. The adrenaline blinds them to basic operational security.
Hubris creates enormous blind spots.
And their blind spot was stealing.
The killers had been taking trophies from their victims, but not just psychological trophies like the video. They were taking physical items.
Mobile phones, pearl necklaces, rings.
The police, finally waking up to the fact that they have a massive serial pattern on their hands and pulling in investigators from Kyiv, start tracking the GPS and network signals of the stolen mobile phones.
We need to dive into the forensics of this because in 2007, this was highly effective, albeit slightly newer, police work.
How did it work back then?
Every mobile phone has an IMEI number, a unique identifier. When you turn on a phone, even if you put a new SIM card in it, that unique IMEI pings the local cell towers.
Oh, wow.
The police simply took the IMEI numbers of the victim's stolen phones and waited for them to connect to the network.
And a stolen phone pings at a local pawn shop. The police rush over, interrogate the pawn shop owner, and get the names on the pawn slip.
And there they are, written in ink.
Viktor Sayenko, Igor Saprunyek, and Alexander Hanza. They use their real names.
The police immediately mobilize and raid their homes.
Imagine the scene. They bust into Alexander's apartment and they catch him in the bathroom, literally trying to flush the victim's jewelry down the toilet. He is caught red-handed.
The transition from apex predator to panicked teenager is instantaneous. The moment the physical force of the state breaches their doors, the illusion of invincibility shatters.
But the reaction of the parents, especially Victor's and Igor's parents, is wild. Remember, these are wealthy, connected people.
Right.
When the tactical police teams drag their sons out in handcuffs, the parents react with total disbelief. They immediately claim their sons are being framed by a corrupt police force.
They argue that their boys are handsome, popular, well-behaved kids who would never do something like this.
We talked earlier about how wealth and privilege created a bubble of protection that allowed the boys to escalate their behavior over years without consequence.
That is the tragedy of the unpunished bicycle theft.
But that exact same bubble caused the parents to be entirely blind to the monsters living under their own roofs. Do you think they genuinely didn't know?
I think cognitive dissonance is incredibly powerful. Parents, especially in high-status families, project their own success onto their children.
So admitting their sons did this is like admitting failure.
To admit that their son is a sadistic serial killer is to admit a total failure of their lineage. They couldn't conceive that such darkness could exist within their socioeconomic bracket.
Murder, in their minds, is something that happens in the poor neighborhoods, not in their gated communities.
Exactly. So the bubble bursts.
The boys are sitting in police interrogation rooms, stripped of their fancy clothes, stripped of their parents' protection. How do they react when reality finally sets in?
This brings us to the confessions in the trial. The variations in their confessions are highly indicative of their individual psychologies and their specific roles within the group dynamic.
Right, because Alexander, the one from the poorer background who bowed out of the murders, he immediately confesses to the armed robberies.
He tells them everything about the early crimes.
but he vehemently denies participating in the 21 murders, and the forensic evidence actually aligns with his story.
His DNA isn't at the murder scenes. He wasn't in the car during the killings.
Victor, the prosecutor's son, takes a different route. He initially tries to throw Igor under the bus, claiming Igor did it all, forced him into it.
But under pressure, as they show him the videos they found on his own computer, Victor eventually breaks and confesses to joining in the murders for the thrill of it.
Victor attempts to minimize his culpability, a classic self-preservation tactic. But Igor's reaction is what truly chills investigators.
Igor's is ice cold, completely detached.
When the detectives ask him how he felt while he was killing these innocent people, Igor replies, "How do you feel when you cut a sausage?"
That statement is a chilling demonstration of profound psychopathy. It is the complete and total objectification of human life.
It's just sickening to hear.
A sausage is an inanimate object, consumed for sustenance or pleasure. To equate ending a human life feeling a skull crush under a hammer to slicing breakfast meat shows an absolute void where empathy should exist.
He also claimed he had read somewhere that the more people you kill, the better your chances of going to heaven.
A completely warped, self-serving justification.
But it gets worse. As the interrogations go on, Victor and Igor casually reveal that they actually attended the funeral of 14-year-old Andre, the boy they killed while he was going fishing.
They showed up pretending to be his friends from school.
Just so they could hunt for Vadim, the survivor, and admire their work in the open casket.
Returning to the scene of the crime, or injecting oneself into the grief of the victims' families, is a known trait among severe serial offenders.
It provides a secondary thrill.
A sense of godlike control over the situation. They are standing among weeping relatives, knowing they are the architects of that sorrow. It reinforces their feeling of supreme power.
And their future plans were even more insane. They kept newspaper clippings of all their crimes hidden in their rooms from their parents.
They confess that their ultimate plan was to eventually murder their own parents.
Inherit the money, and use their large, comfortable houses as headquarters to plan even more elaborate, large-scale killing sprees.
It highlights the total absence of any foundational human attachment. Not even familial bonds held any value to them outside of utility.
Their parents were just walking bank accounts to be liquidated when the time was right.
So the trial begins.
The defense tries every trick in the book. Psychiatric evaluations are ordered, but the doctors declare all three of them completely sane.
They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew it was illegal, and they knew it was wrong. They just didn't care.
Victor's father, acting as his defense lawyer, tries to argue in court that his son is insane, that the videos must be deep fakes or manipulated.
Which, in 2007, is a massive stretch of technology.
But the evidence is overwhelming.
The physical evidence from the pawn shops, the digital evidence of the videos, and their own confessions create an insurmountable case. You cannot fake that level of forensic corroboration.
The verdicts come down. Alexander Hansha gets 9 years in prison for his role in the armed robberies. He actually served his time and was released in 2019.
Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprunyuk are found guilty of 21 murders and receive life sentences.
But there's a lingering shadow over the conclusion of this case. A persistent rumor of a fourth accomplice.
The individual referred to in the community as Daniel.
Yes, Daniel. The rumor is that there was a fourth boy involved in the early stages, someone who had even bigger political connections than Victor or Igor.
The story goes that he was brought in for questioning, held for one day, and then quietly released, and his name completely expunged from the record because his family pulled the ultimate strings.
Now, obviously, we must treat that strictly as a rumor, as there is no official record of Daniel.
However, the fact that the rumor persists speaks volumes about the deep generational mistrust the community had toward their institutions.
It raises a profound question. How does a community ever heal when the perpetrators of the worst violence imaginable were the privileged kids from their own affluent neighborhoods, and rumors of corruption and cover-ups still linger in the air?
How do you trust the police who tried to frame a 14-year-old?
How do you trust anyone after that?
Healing requires absolute transparency and accountability, which was painfully lacking here.
When a community suspects that the justice system is tiered, that immense wealth can buy a literal get-out-of-jail-free card even in the face of atrocity, the psychological wound remains open.
The conviction of Victor and Igor provides legal closure, but the release of Alexander and the rumor of Daniel leave a residual anxiety that the system is fundamentally flawed and designed to protect the powerful.
Let's pull all of this together for you. Over just 21 days in the summer of 2007, 21 lives were brutally extinguished.
Men, women, teenagers, people who were just living their lives, walking home, fishing, riding a motorcycle.
They were taken for absolutely no reason other than the thrill of violence, captured on camera by arrogant youths who felt entirely insulated by their social standing.
It is a stark reminder of what happens when privilege morphs into absolute impunity, and when the human capacity for empathy is systematically dismantled by an echo chamber of peer validation.
Which leaves us with a final, chilling thought to mull over. We live in a hyper-connected world today. Everyone has a high-definition camera in their pocket. We film everything for validation, for likes, for views.
The Three Guys, One Hammer case was a dark, early harbinger of this digital age.
It forces us to ask a terrifying question. When a screen constantly stands between a person and the real world, filtering every interaction, how much of our basic, instinctual human empathy is being filtered out by the lens of that camera? If we aren't careful, does the screen make it easier to see violence not as human suffering, but just as content?